everyone. Welcome to another edition of That's Cool. And this is something that I like to talk to you about. Things like technology, gadgets, and sometimes some adventures and sites that you may sit there and go afterwards, oh, that's cool. And today I'm going to continue on my adventure when I was vacationing out in Colorado. As you know, I went away and kind of hid in the Colorado mountains for a week and a half. And in my isolation, I saw some really cool things. Last week, I talked about the great sand dunes that was in more southeastern Colorado. Well, after there, we traveled over, and let me get the map up here. We made a little trek over toward southwestern Colorado, where you see Telluride here on the map, right in this location right there. Well, that is close to where I was staying, okay? And I'll zoom on in this map and show you a little bit better. Now, we stayed at a place just north of Durango, right where that 550 sign is. And one of the days, we stayed in a resort called Purgatory. It's a ski resort. Had a lot of fun. Also passed another ski resort at Hesperus. And that was an interesting ski resort they gave us. I'm just going to say, one of the things that's cool, go ahead and look at some of the reviews at Hesperus. It's a very interesting and unique ski area. Just say that. They gave us some amusement. But anyway, we passed along Route 160 and went to Mesa Verde National Park. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know too much about it. My friends in Colorado told me it was on their bucket list to see, and they did not steer me wrong at all. Now, when you get there, make sure you stop by the visitor center and get a map. You're going to drive by several nice sites like this mountain site you have here, and you're going to see some great vistas on the road that you're moving on through. And interesting, from where we were there, you could see 4 states. No, we weren't at the Four Corners, and we didn't even want to stop at the Four Corners. We were told by many people, including the rangers there, not really worth it. It's not even technically in the right place. The Four Corners placard is not at the intersection of the states. But from up here, we could see Utah to the west. To the southwest, we could see Arizona. We could see New Mexico to the southeast. And we were in Colorado. So that's the 4 states. So we had the view of them that way. All right. And when you finally get up there, you're going to stop by. And the first thing you're going to see there is an app and a guide, and listen to the app, the audio tour, phenomenal. I know you guys here have probably done some in the Gettysburg area, very same thing. You follow along and you go through time. And the first stop is the Pit House. And this was the first sign of civilization in Mesa Verde. And you may be sitting there going, well, what is this Mesa Verde? You're going to see right now, it's where ancient civilizations lived, Native Americans. And they went and they put together a time frame, and this pit house on top of this little mesa top was the oldest house from the ancient civilization that they found. All right? And they did some studying, and from some of the remains and they charred wood fragments nearby, as it says there in a sign. It was just before 600 AD CE. And so they were able to figure out that it was old. And this was the oldest house that they found. And they think that this house, let me move it so you can see it a little bit better, was one of several, and they did find a couple of others. And, you know, the interesting thing, we're in a desert. There's no way you can think people can farm up there, and they can't now. So, what the climate was different back then. And there are a lot of rumors of why the people left the area. Some people say they just vanished, or there was some kind of virus or something like that. But actually, they've studied and they came to they just left because the environment changed. And you're going to see examples of this as I go through. Again, this is really cool stuff. And I'm only going to be touching a little bit. You really do have to check out the Mesa Verde National Park website and maybe see it. So this is the pit house. And there was a wooden frame above it. And they lived in a pit. Now, these holes that they have here, these holes were dug and supposedly their spirits would go down. I forgot the exact name of them. But they lived in this area and they had they had an entranceway, there was a storage area, and the main living area. So they made the best that they could. And then you continue on the tour. The next stop was the Navajo Canyon Overlook. Now, this was an overlook. This is the only thing that's a little bit out of time frame, but it was a good overlook to see other things, not just the mesas and the valley, but if you looked closely, you're able to see some of the ruins where they lived on the side of the cliffs and down toward the valley floor. All right, and this was just a precursor. I'm going to get more to that, but this was a kind of an apartment house of people living close to the turn of the first millennium. All right, right around 1,000 years. But we'll get back to that. So the next stop, we get back closer to 700 to 800 AD, and you got the first what we would call row houses, I guess I would say. They started to build a couple of pit houses right next to each other. So they, again, had a little entryway. They had a storage area. But then they built on. Maybe as their family grew, they built on. And as they were developing and getting better technology, they were building ventilation shafts. So this was really neat stuff. Let me show you some of the pictures here. And you had areas where they were grinding their corn, right here. Different layers, so it was a little deeper in the ground, maybe to make themselves a little more comfortable in what was becoming a very hot environment. And there were multiple rooms. There were walls in between the two, plenty of ventilation areas, and connecting tunnels. And some of these were getting pretty deep down. So, I mean, it's just amazing how they built ventilation shafts, connection tunnels. These were pretty amazing houses, given at that point in time, their only tools that they used were stone. And you could see the stonework is still there, and their entranceways. And so what happened is these were uncovered. People just came upon them, and then they were salvaged and they became part of the national park. The thing to realize, why are these preserved so nicely compared to the eastern United States? A lot, not only just because it was made out of stone, because there was less in the way of precipitation, and erosion didn't really hit this as bad. And now over these structures on the top of the mesa, they have them covered with building tops. And there's a little zoomed in. You can see some of the tunnels that went from one location to another. It's incredible to think that you're looking at things that it was a millennium and a half years ago that they built this. And then we got to the grand view, which is the sun point view. And what happened with the people, at first they were living in the houses up like this. And then for some reason, they started to move their way down. All right. And they went from the tops. And this is a good sign of everything that I'm going to kind of show you right here. And around 1200, they started to go down into the cliffs. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, they had better protection. Two, there was less in the way of exposure to the extreme heat at times that they had there. And 3, at the bottom of the valleys is the only place at that time that they could still grow. Remember, the agriculture was the only reason. We, as human beings, early on, our main thing is we would just travel around. We were nomads up until the point we could do agriculture. And they found this area that was good for agriculture, and they started a farm. Now, they had to be near water sources, so they started working down the cliffs, A, for protection, B, against the harsh heat in the summer and the cold in the winter. Because remember, if you're in a cave, and these were caves that were formed from when there was an old ocean. There was an inland sea. You know, a lot of times you hear about sea levels and everything like that. Well, once there was an inland sea, and this was all a big sea basin. And what you're seeing in some of the roundish tops is where the water was eroded away, and it left these caves behind. And they built cities in them. And some of these had 85 dwellings in those cities. I think that's really cool. And you may sit there and go, well, how did they get there? Because we're halfway. This is toward the top of the big canyon. And I'm going to show you other pictures coming up. They had little footholds and ladders that they would do it. Imagine having a toddler and you had to learn to do that. I mean, these were built halfway up the mountains. Now, you look and you go, wow, look at all those trees down below. Well, trees need water. So there's still remnants of a river underneath. But you couldn't farm there anymore. So a little closer in, look. You can see the stone structure. You can see the different rooms. Behind that scaffolding and that wall, I'm going to show you a better shot. There are still drawings on some of these walls. Now, due to COVID, you can't take the tours down into the area. I would have done it. I'm a little afraid of heights with ladders, and that's how you move, but I think I would have done it. So here's another view of what is called the Fire Temple. This was the largest one. And we're looking at this from across the canyon. So we got close right above it, but you couldn't go down into it. And just amazing, the architecture, and that so many people lived in these cliffs on the side of the valleys. There's a little sample of a painting that they're looking at. And you can see some of the round buildings. There's a little close-up for you. Ventilation staff, some chain, so they had this whole network. They were able to go from house to house. They used ladders like an example over here to get up and down, and ropes to get all the way down to the bottom of the valley. And look, there's multiple layers to this area. You got a house here, a house here, a house here, big structure in the back, still in great shape. And you go, and it goes down, but you're still well above the floor of the valley. And let me go back. I wanted to show you a couple of more pictures, wider view, to that. So the sea filled in all of this area, and you can see how far below the tops are to the valley. And so the erosion and the sea would run right all through there. And then there was enough water they can grow corn at first at top, then only in the bottom. So after a while, they lived here for a while. They lived for a couple of centuries in these cities on the side of the road. And this is a temple on the top, kind of like Stonehenge, that they thought would guide the seasons and the sun. So why did they vacate this? Why did they suddenly disappear? Well, probably they had this serious conversation among the people there. And I can almost imagine the meeting where the weather got too harsh. It was too dry, too hot in the summer. You couldn't grow the corn. Life became a little too difficult. And so they started, and what they did, and now we understand that they shifted over down toward the Rio Grande River and to areas down to the south in West Texas and in New Mexico. So they didn't just disappear. they migrated. And they moved to where life was a little better. And they probably, at that point in time, would send out scouts. And the one guide was explaining it to us, that it would send out scouts. And they were looking, and they would send scouts out for a long period of time. And they had to have a meeting and figure out which way to go. So that was another part of my Colorado trip. I'm going to continue to share pictures. Now, not next week. Next week I have something a little more neat that has to do with weather. And severe weather, that is kind of cool. I have an interview that I'm going to be doing on next week's segment. But down the road, I'm going to show you, because there are some places where you can take a secret little hike. Now, we had to drive on dirt roads for hours to get to them. But you can go and hike all the way to where these ancient civilizations were. And the place we found, it was kind of the early cliff dwellings. And I actually got to see the handprints on the wall and everything like that. I'm probably not going to publish the location because this stuff is pretty cool. You can still find pottery on the ground and everything like that. So I'm not gonna do my part. I'm gonna let you, if you need to, find your own research on it. Just because I want to preserve history as much as I can, and I don't want to. Let me just put it this way. We were there for hours and we never saw a single human being. So it's still pretty remote area to get to this. So I was really honored and blessed on that. And I will share that experience with you too. All right. Well, I rambled on enough. This is a little bit longer of That's Cool. For more information, definitely go, and I have links on our website here to the Mesa Verde National Site, the story they tell, about the people, their migration and their lives. My job on That's Cool is to sit there and have you go, oh, that's cool. And I leave a lot of the other education to you, because there's a lot that you can learn. And it was an amazing, really cool site. All right. See you next week.